Hey everyone, Gregor Arturo here. So I had this idea bubbling in my head for quite a while, and it's like getting explosive as of tonight, and that I need to like communicate it to everyone and start getting that 100th monkey effect going out there, because it hasn't been really communicated in detail anywhere. And so this is like the holy grail of free energy, in my opinion, and it's understanding a magnetic vortex and how to harvest or coagulate self-organized chi, etheric potential within a system. And so there's quite a few different ways to do it, but they're all exploring the same phenomena. And they're all about creating a nonlinear divergence in the magnetic vector potential. And so to break down that jargon for people who might not understand exactly what I'm talking about, we're all familiar with a traditional magnetic field. Okay, we got like north, south, and that's the axis. The axis is the magnetic vector potential, and that's usually considered, I mean, it is considered in science, a gradient of the electrostatic scalar value. And so you could say that means you have a difference in voltage along that line, say like 100 volts or something. And so we're trying to create a nonlinear divergence or compression, or a nonlinear gradient of the voltage of the electrostatic pressure. And the way to do that is with magnetism, as they interrelate, and you're trying to create a magnetic vacuum. And so right now the Earth's magnetic field is funneling through everything. It's in this space, unless I'm saying a steel container, and then it gets low. And understanding that the magnetic field itself is a part of the pressure system, and that you have a equal and opposite reaction, Newton's third law, with work and potential, and that magnetism equates to work, and electricity or electrostatic potential equates to potential. And where you have a high magnetic vacuum or low magnetic field, you have high etheric potential. You have a high magnetic field, you have low etheric potential. It's a pressure system. And so a way to generate etheric potential, or to funnel it in, literally, is to create a magnetic vacuum. And there are several ways to go about this. And so one of the most intuitive and interesting of ways that I'm fond of at the moment is with the Star of David, a hexagram. So here is the hexagram modeled in SolidWorks, perfectly mathematically beautiful. Oh, I love that thing. It's really great. And so I can't really, can I do it? Oh, there you go. I can move that bad boy around. Oh, the Star of David. That thing is beautiful. And so the diameter of the core to the diameter of the outside is a 2-to-1 ratio. And so, as you might notice, the double helix forms the same shape as the magnetic field cutaway. Okay, there you go. It's pretty simple. Very simple. What happens if you curve this magnetic field along that axis, say 3 times, as in the Star of David? And so what that does in relation to, say, the Flower of Life, is how the magnetic fields compress upon each other. The opposing magnetic fields, they can't expand into the core. They also expel the external magnetic field in the environment, and so or cause it to dip inwards. It effectively modulates and interacts with the external magnetic environment, but it creates a magnetic vacuum in the core. And so the idea, say, with this image too, is the magnetic field being, say, if you have a ferromagnetic hexagram, say made of iron, and you have it magnetized rotating, and there's a way you can do that, the magnetic field expands outwards around the double helix, and then it compresses in the core. And that's a key feature. And so the idea with this whole system is you're creating compression and expansion of the magnetic field, not only within the helical structure, but within the toroidal structure as well. There's 2 aspects in it. They're very fundamental. A first dimensional aspect and a second dimensional aspect, as the torus relates heavily to the second dimension as a surface boundary layer, a planar boundary layer. And so it essentially creates that little star. I have it. Hold on. Ooh, that was quick. Here we go. Ta-da. We got the flower of life, or no, sorry, the seed of life. And this little guy here in the center is akin to the magnetic vacuum being created. And so there's two gradients or stages to the magnetic vacuum, and that creates a nonlinear system. And so the idea is you're creating this nonlinear divergence in the magnetic vector potential. So the thing to understand the magnetic vector potential, it's a linear aspect in the core of the magnetic field, where the toroidal aspect, the donut coming around it, is the planar aspect. So you have a first dimensional and a second dimensional component within the system. And the thing to understand about the toroidal component, the second dimensional component, is in traditional physics, it's considered to be the B field. It's the curl of the A. And the A field is the magnetic vector potential. And so that the toroidal aspect is a reflection of the first dimensional aspect within the system. And so if you start to create a gradient between the core, such as, say, with a diamagnetic substance which wants to expel the magnetic field, something that compresses it, say, with ferromagnetism or paramagnetism, you start to create a gradient in the magnetic field. It directly relates and is directly proportional to a gradient in the magnetic vector potential. As the potential is unfolding into space, they're dynamically, intrinsically interrelated. They can't exist without each other. And so when you start to create that gradient in the magnetic vector potential, you're thus increasing the gradient of the electrostatic pressure within the system. And so this is what Nikola Tesla did with Wardenclyffe Tower with his antenna system, is he figured out how to create a magnetic divergence within the system, and it increases thus the gradient or divergence as well in the magnetic vector potential. Divergence is compression, essentially. And so another great way to carry out this concept is, you're increasing the electrostatic pressure at the same time is that vacuum allows for etheric potential to coagulate. And that etheric potential translates into what we read as electrostatic potential. And so that can be utilized in different ways. One of the most intriguing of ways is far out there for many people to grasp onto, and it really relates to Atlantean technology, is what Joe did. I don't know Joe's last name, we just call him Joe, who invented the Joe cell. And it's a very simple device. And I'll pull it up right now, also in SolidWorks. There we go. There's the outside canister. We're going to create a cutaway view. There we go. See, there we go. There's a Joe cell. And it's made of stainless steel, 316L, and it has these little circular cylindrical spacers in between the big hollow cylinders. And so the concept with this was with using 316L. And so 316L stainless steel is what's been primarily used in the HHO movement, and also with Joe cells. The thing about to understand with 316L and also 316 and 304 stainless steel, these alloys, is they're austenite, if that's the way to say it, types of steel. There's also martensite and ferrite steel. And so the two I just mentioned are ferromagnetic, where austenite is paramagnetic. And usually steel only exists in the austenite form when it's like, say, above 1,000 to 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. When you add specifically the nickel as well as the chromium, but the nickel is the key piece. It lowers the phase transition of the steel to, say, room temperature, or below room temperature with austenite. And so this allows, say, specifically the 316L is of the highest performance. When you anneal it for a while, let it sit in high heat, it causes the transition, you let it then cool, and especially if you cool it in, I believe, like a salt bath. I don't think it's necessary, but I think the salt bath helps to cool it fast. That you preserve the austenite phase form of the iron, which this crystalline allotrope, it has a paramagnetic structure. It's very, very paramagnetic. And so what that means is, to understand, like, this is one of the fundamentals of magnetism, is you have paramagnetism and diamagnetism. And these are the feminine aspects of magnetism. There's 3 primary forms of magnetism: dia, para, and ferro. And there's also 4 subforms, 7 in total, of antiferro, ferri, superpara, and superdia. And all those end in magnetism. And so, with these 3 forms, I just explained how a ferromagnet, when it's in this specific geometry and magnetized in a specific way, naturally creates a magnetic divergence and naturally creates an electrostatic gradient along its axis. With a this other form, such as with the Joe cell, the Joe cell uses paramagnetism and diamagnetism, and it creates what's called a magnetic oscillator. And when it goes, so you fill up the Joe cell with water, and this water is also structured to where it starts to coagulate ether into it, and that ether manifests in the form of Ormus. This is a whole different science, a whole different realm, and understanding how Ormus is sort of the fundamental building block for our reality, these monoatomic elements, and how you can coagulate monoatomic elements out of the ether as matter. This is the process of manifestation, moving from energy to matter, waveform to something solid, which is really just moving from a traveling wave to a standing wave, you could say. And one of the interesting properties about Ormus is that it's very diamagnetic, and some will even say superconductive at room temperature. And so if you start to coagulate a lot of Ormus in the water, it starts to have extremely diamagnetic properties. And so then if you have the cylinder perpendicular to the surface of the Earth, so it's also perpendicular to the flow of the Earth's magnetic field, regardless of what way it's oriented, because it's a cylinder, when the Earth's magnetic field flows through that cylinder, the paramagnetic properties of the stainless steel focalize it. It acts as a convex lens of magnetism. And it always is receptive to the flow. That's why it's feminine. It never retains any residual magnetization, such as with ferromagnetism. It's always receptive. Diamagnetism is always receptive, except it's opposing the external flow perpendicularly. And sometimes anti-parallel, depending upon the geometry of the fields. But otherwise, it's a perpendicular opposing magnetic field with diamagnetism. But they both are receptive. They're always responding to their environments. And so one thing to understand with self-organizational processes and free energy is you're trying to create an antenna that receives something, essentially. And so that's a feminine process. And when the magnetic field flows through the stainless steel, it gets focalized. Then it hits the water, which water is already diamagnetic, but in theory, if there's one of the things that Joe was talking about is structuring the water highly before putting it in, is if you increase the diamagnetic properties of that water. And so the magnetic field then is expanded as it flows through the water and then compressed through the next layer. So it's going through, say, 4 concentric shells of stainless steel and 4 shells of water. And each time it expands and compresses the field. So one of the things to understand and think about is the acceleration of the field, and that every time it goes through a set of these layers is the oscillation, the coherence as it moves through the layers builds. And so the compression and expansion through each cycle builds upon itself. It's kinetic resonance, essentially, in a 2D fashion, because it's magnetism. And a planar effect. It's planar coherence. There we go. And once the magnetic field reaches the core, which is, say, water, this wire or even bismuth, as it's been demonstrated, which is an extremely diamagnetic substance, is that diamagnetism tends to be a very weak effect unless it's a superconductor. And room temperature superconductors are, well, supposedly they're discovered, but it's also controversial, and otherwise they usually only exist at low temperatures. But superconductor completely expels the Earth's magnetic, or any external magnetic field. It's a perfect diamagnet. It's super diamagnetism, one of the 4 subtypes of magnetism I referred to. And so that's sort of your ideal material. But any diamagnetic substance, the force is usually very subtle. However, in a strong magnetic field, it becomes very exaggerated and much more intense. And so the idea with the shells is it drastically enhances the magnetic vacuum, or the capability of the diamagnetic substance that is the magnetic vacuum in the core, as the diamagnetic substances are concave lenses. And so I think I missed that second phrase, concave, where I got convex before. But again, concave, convex, and that pumps the field, so once it hits a concave substance in the core, such as the water or bismuth, that field is so unbelievably more amplified than it was previously that the subtle effects of diamagnetism are exaggerated, and thus creates a magnetic vacuum, thus allowing chi to funnel in and make itself cozy. Da-dee-da. It's sort of that simple. The thing is, it's probably still a little ahead of the time for planet Earth. I'm still seen as like crazy stoner hippie. But it's awesome in my reality. It's fucking fantastic. And so hopefully the F word will communicate some truth to you in terms of how unbelievably fucking awesome this concept really is, when understanding the beauty of a magnetic vacuum and equal and opposite work and potential. So you're like, whoa, you're misunderstanding work and potential there a little bit. And, well, I don't think so. I think it's right up your alley. You just gotta tune into it. Until then, start digesting, how can I create a magnetic vacuum today? Well, maybe, I was about to grab my pyramid that I made today, but we currently are using it for this. Actually, I'm gonna grab it because it's just beautiful. Hold on, just like 1 second. Thank you. That was funny. Oh, I tripped on myself. There we go. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Simple geometry that creates a magnetic vacuum within its core. That's like another story in itself. But pyramid means fire in the middle, like right there. King's chamber. Focalizes the energy. Naturally focalizes the ether. So that is the predominant difference between how I think about physics and the majority of other people think about physics. There's particle physics and there's lumiferious ether physics, which the Michael Morrison experiment of 1893 sort of like eradicated, and a lot of the physicists were like, well, we can't believe this anymore, even though like pretty much all of us associate with it, and we're gonna have to move on to relativity theory. And saying that sort of like the smaller things within particles make the bigger things work. And lumiferious ether theory is pretty much that, like, hey, there's a cosmic sea of energy flowing through fucking everything, and it funnels into everything to make things work. For example, if you have a river, and that river is flowing with water, that if you've ever, sat by a river and, like, observed it flowing with water, like we probably all have done, you see, like, little eddy currents form. And if that water maintains its, velocity and flow, then that eddy current stays constant. It just stays there like a standing wave. Oh, maybe that's a particle. And so everything we're observing is sort of temporary. And again, a lot of, Taoist and Buddhist philosophical thinking, it's the only constant in the universe is change. And so physics isn't a fan of like that thought process, or at least traditional physics. I love it. Fucking awesome. Change it up every moment. Who knows what tomorrow's gonna bring? Because, you know, that's the only constant. It just keeps changing. And so I think I'm gonna leave it with that. And root on for Lumiferious ether theory. Let's make some magnetic vortices. Let's coagulate some ether into some beautiful, beautiful things that we choose to create here in the now. Until then, ciao, bless, love all of you. I do, because you are me. Just start thinking about that I'm you and you're me, like really, like just like, yeah. Beyond the theory, just be it, embody it, fuck yeah. Now, where's the off button? Oh, here it is. 3, 2, 1. Kidding, you're gonna listen to me for like 2 more seconds. Go.